The sound of my body hitting the steps still echoes in my chest. But louder than the fall was the silence that followed. The silence of my own son watching me lie there, without a word, without reaching out his hand. My name is Thomas Whitaker. I'm 78 years old. Born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, in a small wooden house my father built long before I came along. I've lived a life of hard work, steel, sweat, and long hours in the foundry until my bones ached and my skin smelled of iron. That work fed my family, put a roof over our heads, and built the home where my boy grew up. Every beam, every brick I paid for with my back. And yet, that same boy, the one I held in my arms the night he was born, the one I taught to ride a bike on our cracked driveway, was the one who pushed me. It wasn't a stumble. I've stumbled before. It wasn't an accident. I've known accidents, machines gone wrong, sparks jumping where they shouldn't. This wasn't that. This was his palm pressed flat against my chest, steady and deliberate, and the look in his eyes like I was a burden he'd grown too tired to carry. I hit the first step hard, the breath rushing out of me. Then the next, and the next. My ankle twisted under me with a sharp snap, pain exploding up my leg. My ribs slammed the edge of a step, and the world spun until I came to rest at the bottom, my ears filled with a shrill ringing. I wasn't unconscious. I remember everything. I remember looking up and seeing him standing there at the top of the stairs. I remember how he didn't shout, didn't rush down. He just stared, jaw tight, as if waiting for me to move. And when I didn't, when I couldn't, he finally came down, slow, detached, not to help, not to lift me, but to mutter under his breath, "Dad, I told you to be careful." Then he walked past me, picked up his phone, and scrolled. It wasn't him who called the ambulance. That was Mrs. Ramirez, our neighbor. She heard the thud through the thin walls and came running. She was the one who pressed her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Hold on, Mr. Whitaker," as my son stood a few feet away, watching like it was none of his concern. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and morphine. Doctors poked and prodded, lifted x-rays to the light. 2 fractured ribs, a badly sprained ankle, bruises that painted my side purple. They fitted me with a brace, gave me pills for the pain, and before I could catch my breath, I was told my son had signed the transfer papers. A nursing facility. "For your own good," he said, not meeting my eyes. And just like that, I was no longer a father, no longer a man with a home. I was a patient, a case file, a problem moved off the table. The first night here, I lay in a bed that wasn't mine, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of bleach. The ceiling was plain white, the kind you find in offices, not homes. The mattress squeaked every time I shifted, and through the thin walls, I could hear the sounds of other old souls, some crying out in confusion, some whispering prayers, some silent as stone. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I felt again the push, the dizzying drop, the way my son's eyes hardened like steel. I kept replaying it, trying to convince myself I'd misread it, that maybe he panicked, maybe it wasn't on purpose. But deep down, I knew. I'd felt the decision in that hand. The days here blur together. Morning pills, tasteless oatmeal, fluorescent lights buzzing. The staff mean well. Some are kind, most are busy. But no one looks at you long enough to remember the man you were before the wheelchair, before the cane. And in the silence, memories sneak in. I see my wife, Helen, standing at the kitchen stove, frying bacon on Sunday mornings. I see my boy, Matthew, sitting cross-legged on the living room carpet, building Lego towers that stretched taller than his little head. I hear his laugh, high-pitched, innocent, and the way he'd run to me when I came home from the foundry, arms outstretched, face smudged with chocolate or dirt. Where did that boy go? At what moment did he stop being my son and start seeing me as a weight? Was it when Helen passed, and I lost the habit of smiling? Was it when I stopped driving, when my hands shook too much to hold a wrench? Or was it always waiting in him, this coldness, waiting for me to grow too old to fight back? I should have seen the signs. "Dad, don't you think it's time to rest?" he'd say, with that tone, not caring, not curious, but dismissive. "Dad, the house is too much for you. You can't keep up. Dad, you're being too sensitive." Not once did he shout. Not once did he insult me outright, but piece by piece, I became invisible. They'd pass me my plate without asking what I wanted. They'd whisper to each other in the kitchen, lowering their voices when I walked in. And then the day came when he stopped calling me Dad. He called me Sir once, by mistake. A habit from talking to his boss, he said. But it stung all the same. The push wasn't the start. It was the end of a long unspoken decision. I didn't get to pack my things, didn't get to take the photo albums, the tools I kept polished even after retirement, the quilt Helen had stitched by hand. I arrived here with a duffel bag packed by someone else, clothes folded by hands that weren't mine. The walls in this room are blank. The art in the hallways are generic. Paintings of flowers that never grew in our soil, clocks that tick with no meaning. This place isn't cruel, but it isn't home. And yet, I'm still breathing. My heart still beats. My hands, though bruised, still twitch with the urge to make something. Maybe that's why I'm telling this story. Because if I don't, no one will. Because a man doesn't disappear the moment he's placed in a quiet room. Because I refuse to let my life, the sweat, the laughter, the love, the work, vanish like a shadow at dusk. This isn't about revenge. I don't care if anyone judges my son. The world will judge him in its own time. This is about dignity, about holding on to the last piece of myself. My name is Thomas Whitaker. And though I am hurt, though my ribs ache and my ankle throbs, I am not finished. Not yet. Before I go on, let me ask you something. Not as a stranger, but as a man sitting alone in a quiet room, speaking into the dark, hoping someone out there is listening. If you've stayed with me this far, let me know where you are. Write your city in the comments. Tell me where these words are reaching. Give this story a like if it touched you, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more. Because this channel, this space, is the only place left where men like me can speak without being cut off, where our stories can breathe. And tonight, I need you to breathe it with me. The mornings here always start the same. A cart squeaks down the hallway before the sun has fully risen, wheels wobbling like an old grocery buggy. The nurse's aide, a woman named Denise, mid-40s with tired eyes, pushes it from room to room, knocking softly, carrying styrofoam cups of instant coffee, scrambled eggs that taste like damp cardboard, and little paper cups with pills. The first time she rolled that cart into my room, she said my name like she'd practiced it from a list. Mr. Whitaker? Flat, polite, professional. Not the way Helen used to say it, half laughing whenever I lost my keys. Not the way Matthew once called me Dad when he fell off his bike, blood running from his knee. No, here I was, a line on a chart. She helped me sit up, handed me the coffee. I sipped it and tasted nothing. That nothingness hurt more than the bruises. Outside my door, I could hear the shuffle of slippers, the groans of men and women whose bodies no longer obeyed them. One man coughed so violently I thought he might break. Another muttered names. Maybe his wife's. Maybe children long gone. That's when it hit me. This was my world now. Not the clanging of steel beams, not the Sunday smell of bacon and biscuits, not the laughter of neighbors on the porch. No, my new world was a hallway of the forgotten. On my second day, I met my roommate. He wasn't there when I arrived, but sometime during the night, while I twisted in pain and tried not to cry out, they wheeled him in. In the morning, I woke to the sound of his breathing, heavy, deliberate, like a slow engine. "Morning," I croaked, my throat dry. He turned his head, eyes sharp despite the deep wrinkles. "Name's Harold," he said. His voice was gravelly, like someone who'd smoked half his life but quit too late. Used to drive long-haul trucks. 40 years. Been everywhere from Miami to Seattle. Now look at me, parked in here. I almost smiled. His bitterness was familiar, not cruel, just honest. "I'm Thomas," I said. "Steelworker. Retired before my body gave up." He chuckled once, short. "Retired? You mean they told you to stop? Same thing they told me when my knees went. You know what happens to men like us? We get stored, like tools nobody needs anymore." We didn't say much more that morning, but something in the way he spoke, blunt, unashamed, made me feel less alone. Later that afternoon, Denise came back with a young volunteer, a girl, maybe 16 or 17. She wore sneakers too white for this place, jeans with rips at the knees, and a ponytail that bounced when she walked. She pushed a cart of books, old paperbacks stacked like bricks. "This is Rachel," Denise announced. "She's here for her community service hours. If you want a book, just let her know." Rachel smiled nervously. "Hi." I didn't answer right away. I stared at the books instead. Most were romances, some mystery novels, a Bible with a cracked spine. My eyes fell on a book about woodworking, its cover worn, the picture of a man sanding a chair. My chest tightened. "I'll take that one," I said. Her smile widened. "Good choice." She handed it over like it was sacred. I didn't tell her why I chose it. Didn't say that I once had a workshop of my own, a garage filled with the smell of sawdust, where Matthew and I built a birdhouse when he was 10. Didn't tell her that after Helen died, I'd spent nights smoothing wood just to keep from drowning in grief. Instead, I took the book in silence, feeling its weight like a secret. Days passed. Harold and I developed a rhythm. He liked to sit by the window, staring out at the parking lot as if trucks might roll in any second to pick him up. Sometimes he'd tell me stories, near misses on icy highways, diners in the middle of nowhere, the loneliness of sleeping in cabs. "You think family saves you from loneliness?" he said once, staring at the horizon. "Not always. Sometimes they make it worse." I knew what he meant. At night, when the halls went quiet and only the hum of machines remained, I thought about Matthew. About that push. About the moment his hand left my chest and I started to fall. I kept asking myself, was there hesitation in him? Did he regret it even as he did it? Or was it clean, easy, like brushing dust off his shoulder? The not knowing gnawed at me more than the bruises. On the 5th day, something shifted. I was sitting in the courtyard, a small square of cracked concrete with 2 benches and a bird bath that hadn't seen water in years. The sun felt good on my face, though. Harold was beside me, chewing on a toothpick he'd somehow smuggled in. That's when Rachel appeared again. She had her backpack slung over one shoulder and a sketchbook tucked under her arm. She waved awkwardly. "Mind if I sit?" "Go ahead," Harold grumbled. She sat cross-legged on the ground, opening her sketchbook. She started to draw the dead bird bath, pencil scratching fast across the page. I watched her for a while, then asked, "You always draw broken things?" She looked up, startled. Then she smiled a little. "I like things that have a story. Cracks, chips, rust. It means they lasted long enough to get worn down." Her words settled in me. I thought of my scarred hands, my bruised ribs, the ache in my ankle. Maybe she was right. Maybe broken wasn't worthless. Maybe broken meant lived. For the first time since the fall, I felt something other than grief. It was small, like a spark in the dark. That night, lying in my narrow bed, I thought about the savings account I'd kept hidden for years, money I'd never touched, not even when Helen got sick. I had planned to give it to Matthew someday. A nest egg, a gift, a last way of saying, "I believe in you." But now the thought of handing it to him felt wrong, like watering a plant that had already withered. My chest ached with the weight of that secret. What if the money could mean something else? What if, instead of dying in silence, I used it to leave behind something better than bitterness? I didn't know the answer yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't done. I was still here, still breathing, still Thomas Whitaker. And this story, my story, wasn't finished. There's a sound in this place I can't get used to. Not the humming of the machines, not the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum, not even the coughing at night. It's the silence between all of that. A silence that swells like water in your ears, pressing down until you start to hear echoes of your own past. That's when the memories come. Not in order, not gentle, but jagged, like shards of glass catching the light. I remember Helen's hands the first time we met. We were 19, standing outside a church picnic in Montgomery. She had flour on her cheek from helping in the kitchen. Her laugh was easy, and when she shook my hand, she squeezed like she meant it. I thought then, this is a woman who'll never let go halfway. She didn't. Not for 52 years. When Matthew was born, she was the one who carried the rhythm of our days. She woke first, humming while she brewed coffee. She patched my work shirts when they tore. She rubbed salve on my cracked knuckles at night. And she read stories to Matthew, even when her own eyes burned from exhaustion. Me? I worked. That's what I knew. 12-hour shifts in the foundry, sparks flying, the roar of the furnace louder than thought. I came home coated in sweat and dust, my muscles aching like lead. But when I walked through that door and saw Matthew's small hands waving, heard Helen call from the kitchen, the fatigue melted. I had purpose. Sometimes, when the silence here gets too loud, I drift back to one night in particular. Matthew was 7. He'd gotten into trouble at school for talking too much. Helen was scolding him gently, and he sulked at the table, kicking his feet. I came in late, lunchbox in hand, smelling of smoke and iron. He looked up at me with those big brown eyes and said, "Dad, can you tell Mom that talking isn't that bad?" I chuckled. Helen gave me that look, the one that said, "Don't you dare undermine me." But I couldn't help myself. I sat beside him and said, "You know, son, talking's not bad at all. It's what you say that matters. You've got to use words to build, not tear down." His eyes lit up. "Like you build bridges?" "Yes," I said, ruffling his hair. "Except I build with steel. You'll build with your words." That boy believed me then. He hung on my every word, wanted to know everything I knew, how to fix a bike chain, how to sand a 2x4, how to throw a curveball. He was mine. He was us. Where did that boy go? Back here, in this place, days crawl. Harold snores like thunder at night. but I've grown used to it. He likes to play dominoes with the other men down the hall. I don't join. I sit by the window and read the woodworking book Rachel gave me. My hands ache too much to try anything, but the pictures stir something inside me. The memory of smooth cedar, the weight of a hammer balanced in my palm, the way wood shavings curl like ribbons when a blade runs true. Rachel stops by every few days. She always has that same nervous smile, like she's not sure she belongs here. She carries her sketchbook everywhere. Sometimes she asks me questions like, how long does it take to make a table by hand? Or, what kind of wood smells the best? Simple questions. But the way she listens, really listens, feels like rain after a long drought. Once, I told her about Helen's rocking chair. I built it the summer Matthew turned 4. Helen wanted a place to sit on the porch while he played in the yard. I spent weeks after work carving the arms smooth, making sure the rock was steady. When I unveiled it, she ran her hand along the wood and said, "You built this for me?" "For us," I said. She used that chair every evening until the day she couldn't climb the porch steps anymore. Even then, I moved it inside for her. After she passed, I couldn't look at it without feeling both pride and pain. Rachel listened, eyes wide. She whispered, "That's beautiful. No one's called anything I've done beautiful in a long time. But nights are different. Nights are heavy. I dream of the fall." Again and again, his hand pressing, the floor tilting, the helplessness as gravity did its work. I wake drenched in sweat, ribs aching as if I'd just hit the ground. Sometimes I see his face in the dark corner of the room, watching me. Not the boy who once begged me to teach him how to fish, but the man who pushed me. One night I whispered into the darkness, "Why?" as if he might answer from wherever he was. Of course, only Harold's snores replied. The next morning, my ribs screamed as Denise helped me dress. She chattered about her kids, one in college, one still in high school. I nodded, half listening, my mind elsewhere. My son doesn't even call me, and here she is telling me every detail of her children's lives. I didn't resent her. I envied her. On the 8th day, Harold said something that struck me. We were sitting in the courtyard, Rachel sketching again. Harold leaned close and muttered, "Kids these days don't stick around. My daughter lives 3 miles from here. You know the last time she came? 2 Christmases ago. Brought me a sweater 2 sizes too small. Said she was busy." I asked, "Do you hate her for it?" He chewed on his toothpick, eyes narrowing. "Hate? No. Hate takes too much energy. I just stopped expecting. That's how you survive in here. Stop expecting." That stayed with me. Stop expecting. But part of me still does. Part of me still looks toward the hallway whenever I hear footsteps, hoping it's him, hoping he'll say he's sorry, that it was a mistake, that he still sees me as his father. Hope is a stubborn thing. I've been turning over that secret account in my mind. I never told Helen about it, not even on her deathbed. She would have told me to use it for myself, for medicine, for repairs, for rest. But I saved it. For Matthew. Always for him. And now? Now I sit here, staring at the ceiling, wondering if handing it to him would be like giving a stranger the keys to my soul. Rachel asked me once, "Why do you keep reading that woodworking book if you can't make anything anymore?" I answered without thinking, "Because it reminds me I was more than just old." She didn't laugh. She nodded like she understood. That's when it hit me. Maybe the money wasn't meant for blood. Maybe it was meant for something else. Something that would remind me I was more than broken bones and a forgotten name. The silence presses harder tonight. I think of Helen, gone 14 years. I think of Matthew, gone in a different way. I think of the life I built and how quickly it was taken from me with a single push. But I'm not done. Not yet. Tomorrow, I'm going to ask Rachel something. Something that might change the direction of what little time I have left. There's a particular smell that clings to these halls. Not rot, not filth. The place is clean enough. It's something else. Bleach, liniment, and resignation, all stirred together until you can't tell which is which. I taste it at the back of my throat when I wake up in the middle of the night, ribs aching, ankles swollen. It makes me think of hospitals, of waiting rooms where time doesn't move. But every now and then, there's a different smell. Faint, unexpected, like a memory sneaking in through the cracks. Sawdust. The first time it happened, I thought I was dreaming. I was sitting by the window, staring at the parking lot where visitors came and went, most of them for someone else. Then the scent hit me, light but unmistakable. I turned, and there she was. Rachel, kneeling on the floor with a small block of wood in her lap, a cheap carving knife in her hand. She looked guilty, like a kid caught sneaking candy. "I found it in the art room," she said. "It was just lying around." I blinked. "You know how to use that?" She shook her head, ponytail bouncing. "Not really. I was hoping maybe you'd show me." The sight of her holding that knife sent something sharp through me. Not fear, but ache. I hadn't touched wood in years. My hands weren't steady anymore. My fingers cramped if I held anything too long. But the thought of passing on what I knew stirred me like nothing else had in months. I motioned her closer. "Careful. Don't hold it like that unless you want to lose a thumb. Here, let me." She handed me the block and knife. The handle fit awkward in my hand, heavier than I remembered. My fingers shook. For a second, I thought I couldn't do it. But muscle memory is a stubborn thing. I steadied my grip, angled the blade, and drew the first shaving. The curl of wood fell onto my lap like a ribbon. The smell. Oh, God, the smell. It filled my lungs, warm and raw, and for an instant I was back in my garage in Birmingham. Helen calling from the kitchen, Matthew tugging at my sleeve saying, "Can I try, Dad? Can I try?" My chest clenched, but I didn't stop. I carved slow, letting the blade whisper across the grain. It wasn't much, just the suggestion of a bird, wings not yet spread, beak barely shaped. But when I handed it back to Rachel, her eyes widened. "You did that in 5 minutes," she whispered. I shrugged, forcing a smile. 5 minutes and 50 years. She held it like it was precious, even though it was crude. "Will you teach me?" Something in me cracked open. "Yeah," I said. "If these old hands hold out, I'll teach you." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of pain, though it was there, as always, but because of what that carving stirred in me. For years, I'd saved that secret account for Matthew. Every shift I picked up after Helen's funeral, every dollar I squirreled away, was meant for him. Not for me. Never for me. I imagined handing it to him someday, maybe on his birthday, maybe when he became a father himself. I pictured his face lighting up, his arms wrapping around me, gratitude replacing the distance that had grown between us. It was my hope, my anchor. But the man who pushed me down those stairs? The man who signed papers to tuck me away like last season's clothes? That man wasn't the boy I once held. That man wouldn't honor what I'd saved. He'd burn it fast, like dry leaves. And then I saw Rachel's face. her eyes shining as she held that little bird. I thought of Harold too, old and bitter, but still here, still breathing. I thought of the men and women in these halls, most forgotten, yet still human, still needing something more than pills and pudding cups. For the first time, I wondered, maybe the money was never meant for Matthew after all. Maybe it was meant for whoever still listened, whoever still cared. The days that followed took on a new rhythm. Rachel showed up every afternoon with scraps of wood she scavenged from the art room. Nothing fine, pine blocks, splintered edges, sometimes cracked. But to me, they were treasure. I taught her how to sand the roughness down, how to read the grain, how to guide the knife so it followed the wood instead of fighting it. Her first attempts were clumsy, but her focus was pure. She leaned in close, tongue between her teeth, pencil tucked behind her ear, eyes narrowed in concentration. "You're rushing," I'd say. She'd laugh. "You sound like my grandma." "Your grandma ever build furniture?" "No, she just crochets." Then she knows patience. Listen to her! Harold watched from the window seat, shaking his head. "You're wasting your time, Whitaker. She'll forget all this in a week." Rachel ignored him. So did I, because for the first time since the fall, I felt alive again. Not just existing, but living. Passing something on. Planting a seed. One evening after she left, Harold muttered, "You getting soft." I looked at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You know as well as I do, these kids come and go. You teach her all this, she'll thank you, maybe cry at your funeral, then she'll move on. That's how it works." I let his words sit. He wasn't wrong. But then I thought of Matthew, blood of my blood, who had already moved on without a funeral, who had pushed me not just down the stairs, but out of his life. "Better to give to someone who listens," I said quietly, "than to someone who doesn't even look at you." Harold didn't reply. He just turned back to the window. But I caught the flicker in his eye, the way his jaw clenched. That night, the silence pressed heavy again. I dreamed of Helen. She was sitting in her rocking chair, the one I built, humming a hymn I couldn't quite place. I reached out, but she kept rocking, further and further away, until the chair dissolved into shadows. I woke with tears on my face. For the first time, I let myself cry. Not just for her. Not just for the fall. For everything. For being 78 and realizing that the person you loved most in this world is gone, and the one you loved second most doesn't want you anymore. But then, through the crack in the curtain, I saw the little wooden bird on Rachel's sketchbook, left behind by accident. Its rough wings caught the moonlight, and something inside me whispered, "You're not done yet." The following morning, I asked Denise for a favor. "Can you get me a folder, some paper, a pen?" She looked at me curiously. "Planning to write a memoir, Mr. Whitaker?" "Something like that," I said. I wasn't ready to tell her the truth, that I needed to see the numbers on that account again, needed to feel the weight of that secret in ink, not just memory. I needed to make a decision before time made it for me. That afternoon, when Rachel arrived, I asked her a question. "Rachel," I said, as she spread her sketchbook on the table, "if you could do anything with your life, anything at all, what would it be?" She froze. The pencil slipped from her fingers. I don't know." "Yes, you do. First thing that comes to mind." She hesitated, then whispered, "Design. I want to design things. Furniture, maybe. Spaces. Things that last. But college. We can't afford it. My mom works 2 jobs. My grandma takes care of me. It's not realistic." Her words hit me like a hammer. Furniture. Things that last. I swallowed hard. Realistic's just another word for scared. She looked at me then, really looked, like she wanted to believe me. And in that moment, I knew. The decision had already been made. It's strange how the air changes when you know something is coming. The same fluorescent lights flicker. The same cart rattles down the hall with oatmeal and orange juice. The same TV in the lounge blares reruns of old game shows. But underneath all of it, there's a current, sharp, electric, telling you the world is about to shift. That morning, I felt it in my bones before anything happened. My ribs ached harder than usual. My ankle throbbed like it wanted to remind me of every step I couldn't take. The silence wasn't just silence. It was waiting. And then the footsteps came. I knew them before I saw him. You don't forget the sound of your own child's walk, the way weight shifts, the rhythm of it. I'd once known Matthew's footsteps in our hallway at home, padding soft in pajamas when he was little, heavy and rushed when he was a teenager sneaking out. Now they echoed down the nursing home corridor, sharper, faster, the shoes of a man who wanted to get in and out. The door creaked. He stood there, hands stuffed in his pockets, hair uncombed, eyes darting everywhere except mine. "Dad," he said. His voice was flat, almost rehearsed. I didn't answer right away. I studied him the way I used to study steel beams at the plant, checking for cracks, testing if they could bear the weight. Finally, I said, "You came." He let out a breath, half a laugh. Of course I came. But even he didn't sound convinced. The silence between us was heavier than any furnace I'd ever stood beside. "You doing okay?" he asked, eyes still avoiding mine. I tapped my ribs gently. "Doctor says it'll heal. Pain's just slower at my age." He nodded, still staring at the floor. "That's good." There was so much I wanted to say, to ask why, to scream, to beg. But instead, I asked the simplest question. "Why are you here, Matthew?" He shifted, cleared his throat. "I thought, maybe you'd want to come back home." The words hung in the air like smoke. I almost laughed. Home? The same house where he pushed me? Where he left me on the floor like trash? I shook my head slowly. Home isn't walls, son. It's how someone looks at you. You stopped looking at me a long time ago. For the first time, his eyes snapped to mine, and for just a second I saw something crack. Guilt, maybe. Fear. But he buried it quick. "You're making this harder than it has to be," he muttered. "No," I said, my voice steady. "You already made it hard." He sat on the edge of the chair, leaning forward. "Look, I know things got tense. I know maybe I lost my patience. But you have to understand, Dad. I've got bills. I've got stress. I can't." I raised a hand, cutting him off. "You can't what? Be a son?" His jaw tightened. "That's not fair." Neither was the push. The room went silent. My words landed like a hammer. He looked at me, and for the first time since that night, he didn't hide from it. His lips parted, but no words came. His hands shook in his lap. "You remember it," I said softly. "You know it wasn't an accident." He swallowed hard. "I was angry. I didn't mean—" He stopped, choked on his own excuse. I didn't know what else to do." I leaned forward as much as my ribs allowed. "You could have talked to me. You could have told me you were drowning. You could have asked for help. Instead, you chose silence and that push." His face twisted, shame and anger fighting for space. I felt tired, not from the argument, but from the years. from carrying love that was never returned. He changed the subject then, abruptly. The house feels empty without you. It's not the same. I thought maybe you'd want to come back. We could reset. I almost wanted to believe him. Almost. But deep down, I saw it for what it was. Convenience. He didn't want me because he loved me. He wanted me because, without me, the house was too quiet, too hollow. I shook my head again. No, I've got quiet here too. But it's different. It doesn't hurt as much. He stared at me, stunned. He wasn't used to me telling him no. Later that night, when Harold returned from Domino's, he found me still sitting upright, staring at the ceiling. "What's got you looking like a ghost?" he asked. "My son came," I said. He whistled low. And I told him I wasn't going back. Harold leaned on his cane, studying me. "Took you long enough." I chuckled once, bitter. "You sound like you expected it." "I've seen it before," he muttered. "Some of us keep chasing ghosts till we die. Some of us finally let go." I didn't answer, but in my chest, I felt something loosen. The next afternoon, Rachel came by. She noticed the tension right away. "You okay, Mr. Whitaker?" I hesitated, then said, "My son visited." Her eyes widened. "That's good, right?" I shook my head. "Not really. Sometimes visits don't mean what you hope." She didn't press. Instead, she pulled out a fresh block of wood and said, "Then let's carve today." We sat side by side, shavings gathering at our feet. I guided her hand, steadying the knife. She concentrated so hard her brow furrowed. "You know," I said after a while, "I used to think everything I saved in this life had to go to my son, like it was my duty, my blood." She glanced at me, cautious. "But now?" I exhaled slowly. "Now, I'm not so sure blood's the only thing that matters." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was respectful, not dismissive. And in that silence, I made my decision. The money wouldn't go to Matthew. It would go where it meant something, where it would outlive bitterness, where it might build instead of rot. That night, I opened the folder Denise had given me. The account balance stared back at me in neat black ink. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough for someone to start. Enough to repair something broken. Enough to plant a seed. I ran my finger over the numbers. For years, I guarded them like a secret treasure for a son who no longer wanted me. Now, for the first time, they looked different. They looked free. I whispered into the empty room, "Helen, I think I finally know what to do." And for the first time since she died, I slept without dreaming of the fall. The morning after Matthew's visit, the air felt different. Not lighter, not yet, but cleaner, like a window had been cracked open in a stale room. For months, maybe years, I'd been carrying the weight of that account like a stone in my chest, guarding it, protecting it, saving it for a future that never came. Now, the decision sat steady inside me. It wasn't his anymore. It was mine. The choice was mine. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just reacting to life. I was steering it, even if the road ahead was short. That afternoon, I asked to speak with the facility administrator. Her name was Linda Howard, a woman in her early 60s with kind eyes that tried to hide behind a clipboard. She ran this place like a ship captain, efficient, alert, but with a softness when she looked at residents too long. She invited me into her office, a small space lined with file cabinets, a clock that ticked too loudly, and a fake plant in the corner. "What can I do for you, Mr. Whitaker?" she asked, folding her hands. I took a breath. My ribs still complained when I inhaled too deeply. but the words needed air. "I've got some savings," I said. "Money I never used. I want to put it toward something here. Something that matters." Her eyebrows lifted. "That's generous, but—" "Are you sure? Most residents don't—" "I'm not most residents." My voice cracked, but I steadied it. "I don't want it going to waste. I want it to outlive me." She leaned forward. "What do you have in mind?" I hesitated. The idea had been swirling for days, but saying it out loud made it real. A library, or a workshop. A place where people here can do more than just wait. Somewhere to remember who they were. Her eyes softened. "That's a beautiful idea." I nodded, clutching the folder tighter. "I don't need my name on a plaque. I don't need credit. I just need it to exist." She smiled, though I could see moisture glinting in her eyes. "We can make that happen." For the first time in weeks, I exhaled without pain. When I told Harold, he barked a laugh. "You're going to spend your money on a bunch of half-dead old-timers?" "Yes," I said simply. He shook his head, but the corner of his mouth twitched. "Damn fool. But maybe a good fool." Rachel showed up later that afternoon, backpack slung over one shoulder, hair damp from the rain outside. She carried a stack of papers, sketches, furniture designs clipped from magazines, doodles of chairs and tables. She plopped them on the table. "I've been thinking about what you said, about not being scared, about realistic just being another word for scared." I flipped through her pages. Some were rough, but others had vision, lines that wanted to be real. I looked up at her, my throat tightening. "You've got something," I said. She blushed, tucking hair behind her ear. "Yeah, well, doesn't matter if I can't go to school." I tapped the folder in my lap. "What if it did?" Her eyes shot to mine. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer yet. Not fully. But I let her see the weight of it in my gaze. That I wasn't just an old man wasting away. I was someone who could still build. Not with wood and nails, but with choices. That night, I dreamed of Helen again. This time she wasn't in the rocking chair. She was in the kitchen, apron dusted with flour, humming while she kneaded dough. I stood in the doorway, younger, stronger, watching her hands press and fold. She looked up and smiled. "You always were stubborn, Thomas," she said. "But you finally figured it out." I woke with tears on my cheeks, but a strange peace in my chest. The next day, Linda gathered me, Harold, and 2 other residents into the lounge. "We've started planning," she said, holding a stack of papers. "We'll clear out the old TV room at the end of the hall. With the funds Mr. Whitaker has generously provided, we'll put in shelves, order books, maybe even a couple of workbenches. It won't be huge, but it will be ours." The room murmured with surprise. One of the women, Mrs. Jackson, covered her mouth, whispering, "A library?" Like it was a miracle. Harold just grunted, though I saw his eyes glisten. Rachel clapped softly. "That's amazing!" And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride without pain. Later, when we were alone, Rachel asked, "Why would you do this? For us? For me?" I studied her face. So young, so full of the years I didn't have left. "Because I spent my life giving to people who didn't want it. I won't make that mistake again. I'm giving it to the ones who'll use it." Her lip trembled. She reached into her bag and pulled out the wooden bird I'd carved, now strung on a thin ribbon like a pendant. "Then I'll carry this with me. Always." For the first time since the fall, I felt whole. That night, Harold sat beside me, unusually quiet. After a while, he muttered, "My daughter hasn't called in a year. Maybe she never will." But if that library happens, maybe I'll read to my grandson when he visits, if he ever does. I placed a hand on his shoulder. It's never too late to leave something behind. He snorted, but didn't pull away. The decision was made. The money had a home now, but deep inside, I knew it wasn't over. Because sooner or later, Matthew would come back. And when he did, I'd have to tell him the truth, that his inheritance was no longer his, and that conversation would be the hardest of all. I could tell something was wrong the moment I saw Linda's face. She stopped by my room one evening after dinner, papers tucked under her arm, that practiced calm smile stretched a little too tight. "Your son came by earlier," she said gently. "He asked about the account." My ribs tightened, though they weren't the ones that hurt. "And you told him?" Her eyes flickered, guilt softening her voice. "I didn't give details, just that you'd already directed the funds. He didn't take it well." I nodded slowly. I'd been expecting this storm. Now it was rolling in. Sure enough, the next night, I heard those footsteps again. Quicker this time. Angrier. My door swung open without a knock. He stood there, jaw clenched, fists buried in his pockets. For a second, he just stared at me, the way a man might look at a locked door. "Where is it?" he said flatly. I set down the carving knife I'd been holding, the small block of wood half-formed in my lap. "Where's what, Matthew?" "You know damn well. The money, the savings. You told me my whole life you were saving for me." The air in the room went still. Even Harold, half dozing by the window, cracked one eye open. I drew a breath. "I did save for you. Every penny after your mother passed, every shift I shouldn't have worked. I saved it all for you. But then," my voice cracked, but I pushed on. "Then you pushed me down the stairs." He flinched, just barely, but enough for me to see. "You think that changes everything," he said sharply. "Yes," I whispered. He paced the room like a caged animal. "I made a mistake, Dad. One mistake. And now you're gonna punish me by giving my inheritance to strangers?" I stared at him, stunned. "Strangers?" His words came out in a rush, raw and panicked. "What do you even know about them? They're not your family. I'm your family. I'm your blood. You owe me." The word owe struck me like a slap. I gripped the armrest of my chair, forcing myself upright. "Owe, son, I gave you everything I had. My time, my strength, my youth. I built a house for you. I worked until my bones gave out so you could go to college. I stood at your mother's grave with you when my own heart was breaking. I gave you all of me. And when I had nothing left but those savings, I still kept them for you, until the day you looked at me and saw nothing but weight." His mouth opened, but no sound came. "You didn't just push me down those stairs, Matthew. You pushed me out of your life, out of your respect, out of your love." The silence that followed was thick, painful. His hands trembled at his sides. Finally, he said in a hoarse voice, "You don't understand what it's like. The pressure, the bills. My wife—" I cut him off. "Your wife didn't push me. You did." He sagged against the wall, covering his face with his hands. For the first time, he didn't look angry. He looked lost. A boy again, hiding behind his fingers. "I was scared," he mumbled. "I didn't know how to take care of you. You were slipping away, and I felt trapped. I thought if I pushed you, maybe things would reset. I don't know." I stared at him, my heart breaking all over again. Not because of his words, but because I finally saw the truth. He wasn't cruel. He was weak. He didn't know how to love when it got hard. "I don't hate you, son," I said quietly. "I never could. But love isn't just blood. It's action. And that money? I'm not giving it out of guilt anymore. I'm giving it where it might grow." His eyes burned. "So, that's it? Some girl with a sketchbook gets what I spent my whole life waiting for?" I thought of Rachel, the way she leaned into her work, the way her eyes lit when she imagined building things. I thought of Harold, grumbling but listening, already picturing shelves lined with books. I thought of the other residents who still had something to say, something to share. "Yes," I said, "because she listens, because they see me, because they care. That's more than you've done in years." The words cut him. I saw it. His face twisted, half fury, half despair. He moved toward me suddenly, quick enough that Harold straightened in his chair. For a split second, I braced for another shove. But Matthew stopped. Inches from me, his shoulders slumped. He whispered, "You'll regret this." "No," I said softly. "I regret wasting so many years waiting for you to come back." He closed his eyes. For a long moment, the only sound was his ragged breathing. Then he turned, pulled the door open, and walked out without looking back. The echo of his footsteps faded, and with them, a weight I'd been carrying for decades. Harold let out a low whistle. "Well, that was a hell of a thing." I sank back in my chair, exhausted, tears stinging my eyes. It was the last thing I had to do. He nodded slowly. "Guess you finally stopped expecting." I thought about that. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had. But in the hollow space expectation left behind, something new had room to grow. The next day, Rachel found me in the courtyard. I must have looked worn because she asked, "Rough night?" I nodded. "My son came back." Her eyes softened. "And?" And I told him the truth. She didn't ask for details. She didn't press. She just sat beside me, sketchbook on her knees, silent but present. And that silence didn't hurt. It healed. That night, lying in bed, I realized something. For years, I'd believed dignity was something other people could strip from you, with silence, with dismissal, with a shove. But dignity isn't theirs to take. It's yours to give away, or yours to claim. And I had claimed mine back. The night after Matthew stormed out, the silence didn't crush me the way it used to. It was heavy, yes, but not suffocating. For the first time in a long time, I lay in bed and felt the air in my lungs as mine, not borrowed. I'd spoken the truth. I'd drawn a line in the sand. But the thing about lines is, once you draw them, you're left staring at both sides. On one side, the son I raised, the boy who once held my hand to cross the street, now gone in all the ways that matter. On the other side, this place, these walls, these forgotten people, and a girl with a sketchbook who listened more than my own flesh and blood ever did. I had chosen my side, but that doesn't mean the other stopped hurting. The following week, change arrived in boxes. Real boxes, taped and labeled, pushed in on squeaky dollies by orderlies who grumbled but smiled anyway. Linda oversaw it like a general leading troops. "All right," she said, clapping her hands in the lounge. "We're clearing this room out. Televisions moving to the dining hall. These shelves go against that wall. And Mr. Whitaker," she looked at me, "I hope you're ready to see what you started." I watched as they unpacked books. Not fancy, not leather-bound. Paperbacks, encyclopedias, even a few children's storybooks. I saw toolkits, too, small but real. Hammers, sandpaper, screwdrivers, enough for a start. My chest swelled. For years, I'd measured worth in beams and rivets. in homes that could weather storms. Now I measured it in this: a space for people like me to remember they weren't finished yet. Rachel hovered near me, excitement radiating off her like heat. She grabbed one end of a shelf, helped the orderlies line it up against the wall. Her sneakers squeaked on the linoleum. "This is actually happening," she whispered. I chuckled. "Told you it would." She grinned. "I didn't think you meant so soon." "Sometimes," I said, steadying myself on my cane, "you gotta strike while the iron's hot." Her laugh rang bright, filling the room in a way no television ever could. Over the next few days, the lounge transformed. Residents trickled in out of curiosity. Mrs. Jackson fingered the spines of the books, whispering titles to herself like prayers. Mr. Ellis, a retired mechanic, ran his hands over the new tools, eyes misty. Even Harold wandered in, grumbling, "Damn place smells like Home Depot." But I caught him flipping through a book of road maps later, tracing highways he once drove. One afternoon, Rachel asked if I'd sit with her at the new workbench. She placed a small plank of pine between us. "Show me something harder than a bird," she said. My fingers trembled as I picked up the knife. The pain was there, yes, but I pushed through. "A seed," I murmured. "Everything starts with a seed." I carved slowly, carefully, shaving the wood into a smooth oval. Rachel watched, then copied, her brow furrowed in concentration. When we finished, 2 wooden seeds sat on the table, imperfect but real. She turned hers over in her hand. "It doesn't look like much." I smiled. "That's the point. Doesn't look like much now. But given time, it becomes everything." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw her believe it. Not every moment was light. Nights still brought the ache. I'd close my eyes and see Matthew at different ages. 5 years old, running through the yard with a toy plane. 16, slamming his bedroom door after an argument with Helen. 22, shaking my hand at his graduation, pride in his eyes. Those ghosts hurt more than the living man who'd stood in this room demanding money. One night, I whispered into the dark, "I forgive you, son." I didn't know if I meant it fully, but the words needed to leave me. They floated into the stillness, and in their place, I felt space open up for something else. 2 weeks after the first boxes arrived, Linda organized a small gathering to open the new space. Nothing fancy, just juice boxes, a tray of cookies, and residents gathered in wheelchairs and armchairs. She stood at the front and said, "This room exists because one of our own believed we deserve more than waiting. Because he gave what he had, not to family by blood, but to family by choice." She looked at me then, eyes warm. "Thomas Whitaker." The residents clapped, soft but real. Rachel clapped the loudest. I didn't want to speak, but Linda handed me the floor. My legs trembled as I stood with my cane. My ribs still ached with every breath, but my voice came steady. "I built houses once," I said. "I worked steel. I knew what it meant to make something strong enough to last. But I learned the hard way that not everything built with your hands will hold. Sometimes the things you love collapse anyway. But what matters isn't what breaks. It's what you plant after." This, I gestured to the shelves, the benches, the tools. "This is a seed. It may not look like much, but given time, it'll grow. Because you're not done. None of us are." Silence followed, but not the crushing kind. The kind that fills you with warmth. Rachel whispered, "Beautiful." And for the first time since Helen's funeral, I believed it. That evening, Harold shuffled up beside me in the courtyard. He stared at the twilight sky, chewing his toothpick. "You know," he muttered, "maybe you were right. Maybe it's better to give to the ones who listen. I smiled faintly. You think your daughter will ever visit? He grunted. Probably not. But maybe I'll leave her something anyway, just to prove I was still here. I clapped his shoulder, feeling the fragile strength of bone beneath skin. That's all we can do, Harold. Prove we were here. Rachel lingered after everyone left. She pulled something from her backpack, her sketchbook, opened to a page where she'd drawn the lounge as it looked now, shelves full, residents gathered. It's not perfect, she said, but I wanted to capture it. I traced the lines with my finger, my throat tightening. One day, you'll design real spaces, bigger than this, stronger. And when you do, you'll remember this seed. Her eyes glistened. She hugged me then, tight, fierce, like a granddaughter I never had. I let myself hold on. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of stairs. The human heart is a strange thing. You can speak the truth out loud, you can stand your ground. You can even feel lighter afterward. And still, somewhere deep inside, there's a knot that refuses to untangle. That knot has a name. Matthew. After the night he left, I told myself it was over. That I'd chosen. That I'd given my money, my last measure of energy, to a purpose instead of a person who treated me like weight. And yet, the silence he left behind wasn't the same as before. It was louder, more final. So I decided to write. Not to accuse, not to beg, just to lay it down, like laying a tool back on the bench at the end of a long day. Linda gave me paper and a pen. My hands shook, the words blurring until I had to steady them with both palms flat on the desk. The first line came slow, but once I wrote it, the rest poured like molten steel. Dear Matthew, I paused. Just the name broke me. He was my boy once, my whole reason. I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe I'll burn it. Maybe I'll leave it tucked away in a drawer for you to find after I'm gone, but I need to write it. If only so I don't carry it anymore. The words clawed out of me, one after the other. I loved you from the second I saw you. I loved you when you cried at night, when you scraped your knee, when you slammed doors as a teenager, when you walked across that stage at graduation. I loved you, even when you stopped calling me Dad. I loved you when your hand pressed against my chest and sent me down those stairs. I love you still, though that love has changed shape. It no longer asks for anything in return. I saved that money for you. Every penny, every long shift after your mother died, every moment I chose work over rest. I wanted to hand it to you like a blessing. But blessings don't mean much if the one receiving them sees them as payment. That money isn't yours anymore. I used it to plant something here, in this place where you left me. A library, a workshop, a seed. It may never mean anything to you. That's all right. It means something to me. You may see this as betrayal. You may call it selfish. But I hope one day, when your own son looks at you with eyes that don't recognize you anymore, you'll understand. Love isn't about blood. It's about how you carry someone when they're heavy. You let me fall, and I had to learn to carry myself. I forgive you. Not because you asked, but because I can't leave this world carrying the weight of what you did. Forgiveness doesn't erase the hurt. It just sets me free from holding it too tight. If you ever come back, I won't turn you away. But I won't wait for it either. My waiting days are done. Take care of yourself, Matthew. You were my son. You'll always be my son. But I am not just your father. I am Thomas Whitaker, and I am not finished yet. I signed my name, the letters shaky but legible. Then I folded the paper carefully, slid it into an envelope, and sat staring at it for hours. Harold shuffled in later that night, saw the envelope on my desk. "You finally write that letter?" he asked. "Yeah," I said softly. "You gonna send it?" I shook my head. "No, it's not for him. It's for me." He grunted. "Smart." Then he lowered himself into his chair by the window. After a long pause, he muttered, "Wish I'd written one before my wife passed. Left too much unsaid." I looked at him, the hard lines of his face softening under the dim light. "It's not too late to write to your daughter." He scoffed, but his eyes lingered on the envelope. I think the seed planted itself in him too. The next day, Rachel came early. She carried her sketchbook, as always, but this time she also had a small wooden box. "I made this," she said, setting it in front of me. The corners were uneven, the lid stuck a little, but it was real. Hers. I opened it. Inside sat the wooden seed I'd carved, nestled like it belonged there. "I thought maybe it should have a home," she whispered. My chest ached. "Rachel, this is beautiful." Her eyes shone. "I'm applying to the design program at the community college. I don't know if I'll get in. But if I do, it'll be because of you." I pressed the box back into her hands. "No, it'll be because you wanted it enough to try. I just reminded you." She hugged me then, tighter than before, and in that embrace, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever. Continuity. A line that stretched from Helen to me to Matthew once, and now, unexpectedly, to Rachel. A legacy not of blood, but of choice. That evening, the residents gathered in the new room. Books lined the shelves now. Tools hung neatly on the wall. The air hummed with quiet conversation. Some read, some sanded small blocks of wood. Some simply watched. I sat among them, Kane resting by my leg, and felt the room breathe. It wasn't grand, it wasn't perfect, but it was alive. For the first time I thought, if I died tonight, it would be all right, because I'd left something standing. Later, alone in my room, I tore the letter into pieces. Not in anger, not in regret, but because I realized I didn't need it to exist outside of me anymore. I'd already spoken my truth. I'd already planted my seed. The scraps fell into the trash like shavings from a finished carving. And I slept with the peace of a man who no longer had to hold back words. I never believed in neat endings. Life doesn't tie itself up with a ribbon. It frays, unravels, comes apart at the edges. But sometimes, if you pay attention, you notice how even the unraveling can form a pattern, a shape you didn't expect, but one that makes sense when you step back far enough. Here, in this quiet home with its disinfectant halls and soft fluorescent lights, I thought I was abandoned. Now I know I was planted. The library opened on a Wednesday. No ceremony, no cameras. Just a cluster of old souls, and one young volunteer carrying armfuls of books. Shelves stood straighter, tables polished, the faint smell of sawdust mixing with paper. I sat near the window, Kane propped beside me, watching Rachel line the spines one by one like bricks in a wall. She caught me looking. "What?" she teased, cheeks flushed from the effort. "Just wondering if you realize you've built more in a week than most people build in a lifetime," I said. Her grin stretched wide, but she ducked her head, embarrassed. That humility, it reminded me of Helen. My wife always laughed quietly at praise, as if kindness were a gift too heavy to carry all at once. When the last book was set down, the room fell still. For a moment, nobody moved, We just looked around, breathing in the space as if it were sacred. Harold broke the silence. "Damn shame it took a bunch of broken-down old men to make something feel alive in here." He leaned on his walker, eyes wet but proud. "No shame at all," I answered. "Sometimes it takes people who've lost the most to show the world what it's been missing." Everyone nodded. Some clapped. A few just sat quietly, tears carving lines through faces already mapped by time. Rachel started a ritual. Each evening before she left, she'd place a fresh flower on the center table of the library. Wild daisies, roses from her neighbor's yard, sometimes even weeds she insisted looked beautiful if you squinted. "Why?" I asked once. "Because," she said, "a room with books deserves something alive in it." I didn't tell her, but I thought the same about myself. That maybe I was the flower, tucked in among stories, fragile but still blooming. Matthew never came back, not after the confrontation, not after I tore up the letter. At first I kept glancing at the door during visiting hours, half expecting his restless steps, his distracted gaze, but weeks turned into months. Silence held. Oddly, it didn't hurt as much as I feared. The wound had scarred over. A dull ache, yes, but no fresh bleeding. I realized that by choosing not to send that letter, I had given myself permission to stop waiting. One night, I whispered to the dark, "I forgive you, son, and I release you." The words weren't magic. They didn't erase memory, but they unclenched something in my chest. I could breathe again, without the sharp edge of longing. Spring arrived. Sunlight lingered longer on the benches outside. Rachel got her acceptance letter from the technical college. She burst into the library waving the envelope, hair flying, laughter spilling into every corner. "I got in!" she cried, spinning like a child. I clapped until my palms stung. "I told you," I said, tears pricking my eyes. "It was always you who would make it happen." She hugged me so tight, I thought my ribs might crack again. But I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't watching life pass me by. I was part of it again. She promised to visit after classes, to bring sketches, to keep carving. I gave her my last real tool, a small plane, worn smooth from decades of work. "This is the only thing sharper than my memory," I joked. She kissed my cheek. "I'll make you proud, Mr. Whitaker," I corrected her. "Thomas, just Thomas." And in that moment, she wasn't just a volunteer anymore. She was family, the kind that isn't born, but chosen. The body weakens. That's the nature of time. My ankle still aches. My chest still twinges. Some mornings I wake dizzy, breath shallow, as if the world is tugging me gently toward its end. I no longer fight it. Instead, I sit in the library, surrounded by shelves and sawdust, and I watch the others. Harold, muttering about leather soles as he sands a block of pine. Edith, humming hymns as she turns pages she can barely see. Rachel, laughing as she teaches another resident how to sketch a straight line. I watch, and I feel something settle deep inside me. Peace. One evening, I dreamed of Helen. She stood in the kitchen again, flower on her hands, apron crooked, hair tied back. She wasn't young, not in this dream. She was just as I remembered her near the end. Lines around her mouth, silver threading her hair, eyes tired but kind. "You did all right," she said simply. That's all. But when I woke, I was crying and smiling. I don't know how many more days I have. Could be years, could be hours. But I've learned something vital. Endings don't matter as much as what you leave growing behind you. Matthew may never understand what he lost. That's his burden to carry. not mine. What matters is that I chose not to let bitterness be the last piece of wood I carved. Instead, I carved seeds. I carved hope into shelves, into a girl's trembling hands, into the air of a place once filled with nothing but waiting. If death comes tomorrow, let it find me here, surrounded by stories and the sound of sandpaper on wood. Let it find me smiling, because even in my last season, I managed to plant spring. To anyone hearing my voice now, across the distance of screens and time, don't wait for life to push you down the stairs before you start living honestly. Don't hold on to pain so tightly that it becomes the only thing you leave behind. Choose peace sooner. Choose love where you find it, even if it comes from unexpected places. Because one day, when you look back, you'll realize legacy isn't about what you built with bricks or dollars. It's about who breathed easier because you were here. And if someone ever tells you you're finished, remember my story. Remember Thomas Whitaker, the carpenter who became a seed. I am still growing, even now.